the horn.
I'll jump in if you want. This is just the second meeting that I've been to. I'm Casey Jarbeau with Tacoma Water and in our asset management group here.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Casey. Yeah, well, I'm Mert Muftugil. I'm in the asset management group with the Portland Water Bureau. I've been here for about 2.5 years. In the Water Bureau timeline, relatively new.
Chris?
Yeah, my name is Chris Wu from Metro Vancouver, Canada. And yeah, I've been with Metro for about 5 years. This December actually is my anniversary, and yeah, it's the same, similar to Mert. It's a shorter timeline in Metro Vancouver, but yeah, I think I've seen a lot of new sort of initiatives and people to work with around asset management and risk management. So yeah, I'm excited to share what we have currently and what we'll be doing in the future.
Alariza?
Yes, Ali Reza Parhabi. I'm with DC Water. I'm the hydraulic modeling lead at DC Water with an immense passion in asset management. I'm here to learn from Cello, Mert, and everyone else.
Hey, Alariza, welcome.
Hey.
And Deb and Brittany.
Hi, I'm Deb Rose, and I'm with Asset Management with the Environmental Services part of Metropolitan Council. And I've been with the council for almost 22 years, and asset management, I can't even remember anymore, I think it was since 2016.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Brittany Lovelace with Loud and Water in Northern Virginia. I've been with the company about 7 years, the last 2 of which in asset management.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I used to live in Maryland before I took this job, so I am familiar with the Northern Virginia area a little bit. And I often miss it these days, you know, when the weather becomes a little cloudy and rainy.
Yeah, it's been pretty nice here recently.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Unless, I mean, I don't know if Scott and Cello, they may have other, you know, items as well to bring up.
No, it's all yours. It's all yours.
Take it
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, Chris and I were, you know, basically thinking maybe we can use this meeting to sort of recapture what we discussed last time around for just a few minutes, and then move on to basically, you know, picking a topic area for us to start diving into it as a group, maybe develop some very high level tasks, at least our cadence and schedules to get there. Maybe we can talk about what internal materials we can then sort of, you know, start collecting that may help the process. And then another thing that was that came up in our last meeting was, I think there was some interest in setting service levels as well. So that was, and then I think I may have said something like generally, you know, I do that I could introduce our, you know, framework a little bit, and then I think Chris said that he could do the same. So maybe we want to get that out of the way as well, because that could also feed our discussion on which topic area to choose. And then maybe then afterwards we can then, you know, just maybe make a choice. But just to recapture our previous week's meeting, we focused on primarily, as far as the technical discussion goes, we focused primarily on 2 topic areas for consideration. Again, we could all choose to focus on one together as a group, or we could choose to focus on both if there is sufficient interest and support on either, or we can just pick one ourselves, and then, you know, individual utilities can obviously work on it on their end on something else, and then can report and whatever else. The topic areas we considered were 2 primarily. One of them was taking a risk rating or a score, generally 1 to 5, but whatever, you know, a score-based risk rating concept, and expanding it upon to a more of a monetized consequence of failure approach. The benefits we discussed were there's a link to our other sort of parallel track of enterprise risk management. There are links associated to project prioritization and benefit cost analysis, which links to business cases really, and CIP process a little bit as well. So those were some of the considerations for monetized COF. Another thing we looked at was coming up with rules of thumb, like rules for asset lifecycle cost estimates during, for the course of an asset life, not necessarily focusing on coming up with that replacement cost and replacement cost only, but really thinking about ways to do a better job of estimating the life cycle cost of assets with some rules of thumbs. That could help with our longer term financial planning, which is one of the main outputs of an asset management plan anyway. There are many, but that is one of the main ones. Anyway, I'll shut up now for a second there in case, Chris, Cello, Scott want to add anything to that part of the discussion, just in case. Yeah.
Suggestion would be to come back to that question, at the end, like you suggested, just going ahead with presentations that you and Chris have prepared first.
Yeah, ideally we'll come back, and then today I want to leave this meeting with at least our topic area selected so that we could start thinking about our next steps. Chris, do you mind, or would you like to go ahead with the level of service on your end first?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can do my presentations. I think it will take about 10 to 15 minutes. And if you guys have any questions, just let me know during the presentations or after. And I'm sure there's a lot of sort of common denominator between my presentations and Mert. So yeah, let me share my screen. Can you see my PPT? Okay.
Cover page. Just see it.
Yeah, cover page. So I'll do a presenter mode. So you see the full screen, right?
Yep.
Okay.
My computer is not working. Yes, we see the full screen. Sorry, it's working now.
Yeah, so I actually drafted this presentation in a very short time frame yesterday, just to sort of focus and link this topic to the asset management planning, plan development, as well as risk management, sorry. So this presentation is focusing on the liquid waste services, levels of service, and balanced scorecard. So in Metro, we have two utility groups. One is clean water, drinking water, and the other is wastewater treatment and collection and treatment. So before the recent reorg, I was part of the liquid waste services. That's the department that's managing the wastewater services. And I'm closely involved with the levels of service setting, as well as the balanced scorecard, which is really the nexus where we track and record the current performance of some of the KPIs. So yeah, I'm happy to present what we have in terms of levels of service and how this can benefit other asset management activities. So just brief introduction of who we are. So Metro Vancouver is in Canada, top sort of bottom left corner of the Canada, but it's right above where sort of Seattle is relative to United States. So that small map there has an arrow. So it's basically right sort of north of the border, Canada-US border there, and we have 23 member jurisdictions that are receiving services from us. So that covers about 2.6 million population rather. And we have 4 boards that sort of explains what services that we provide. So the GVS&DD is the sewer and drainage district. So we provide sewerage and drainage services. GVWD is our water district. So that's where we provide the clean water to the region. We have Metro Vancouver Housing Corporations for affordable housing, and as well as regional district, where we have regional parks and air quality monitoring. So for liquid waste services, that's the bigger map on the right hand side. That's basically the area. I don't know if any of you have been to Vancouver, but we have 4 storage area represented in different colors. And also we have 5 treatment plants across the region. So the key investment drivers in Metro Vancouver currently is biggest one is a regulatory, especially for liquid waste services, as we are upgrading the 2 primary treatment plants into a secondary or tertiary even. We call it advanced treatment. And also there's a huge intake of populations either from within other from other Canadian cities or from Asia and other countries, and also maintenance, of course, because a lot of our infrastructures are older, and they're basically starting to showing a sign of degradations, and that sort of creates a service impact. So those are some of the key investment drivers. So, I mean, I put together some of this like levels of service 101 type slides, but I'm sure most of you've seen this. So according to ISO 55000, the level of service is defined as, parameters or combination of parameters which reflect social, political, environmental, and economic outcomes that the organization delivers. So, I mean, in short, it's really the what services you're delivering to the region, and which is often overlooked. Like when people are saying asset management, they're basically focusing on how to manage their assets instead of creating the value, providing the value propositions to the service area, to the clients, and that's really the focusing on that levels of service concept here. And also another sort of diagram that I want to share with you, which probably look familiar to most of you. This is the framework, asset management framework diagram from the Institute of Asset Management. And as you can see at the top level in the gray boxes, we have customers, legislation, investor, customer environment, commercial environments, sorry. And these are the key stakeholders and how they, what types of services and value to get from the organizations. So that's driving the strategic plan for an organization like Metro Vancouver, and within that umbrella, we do different activities to achieve that values and missions for these customers groups. So again, it's very important in terms of sort of starting point of the asset management and how we should track our utility performance to deliver these services. So in terms of the how these levels of services are defined and aligned with the Metro Vancouver, so I call it, well, the industry call it, it's a line of sights and relative to the MV framework. So we start with the Metro Vancouver Board Strategic Plan that we produced for 2019 and 2020. On the left-hand side, there's a graphic of the cover page, and in here we have 3 mission statements that are defined by the board, Metro Vancouver board. And one of the mission statement is called Deliver Core Services. That's our second mission statement. Back to that service we should provide to the region. It's one of the most important missions that's defined in the board strategic plan. The next level down is the integrated liquid waste resource management plan. So where we also have 3 goals, and there's an alignment between what we have in terms of the mission statement at the strategic plan, the top level, and then it is linked down to the liquid waste resource management plan, which is actually currently being updated for the current term. And then one level down, we have the asset management policy for liquid waste services that was published in 2018. And that defines 4 customer levels of service objectives. That sort of drives that customer level service metrics in bracket balance scorecard. So that the right-hand side, the top right graphic with 4 sort of, the pillars, that's our, 33 metrics that are grouped in customer, financial, internal, and learning and innovations. And 13 out of 33 are related to the customer levels of service. And then one level lower is the asset levels of service metrics or technical levels of service. And in Metro, we recently developed asset assessment framework that actually look at the asset assessment, both the condition and performance of the assets in 5 different areas. So physical condition is one area, maintenance costs, how much the cost they were spending on certain assets, and obsolescence, especially instrumentations or communication systems that are, as new technology is available, then certain technology are become obsolete and we no longer receive the service from the vendor. And also we have functionality and compliance angle that we are planning to give a like 1 to 5 score for every 5 for every assets in these 5 areas or criteria. So that's basically the bottom right graphic there with 5 color coding and 5 areas there. So the sort of the part of this type of framework is we can customize the language, 1 to 5 language for different asset types. Like for example, pipes will have certain set of guidelines of how to score 1 to 5 versus, civil building structures versus, rotating, the pumps or valves, mechanical assets. So that's how we sort of structure our levels of service relative to the higher organizational objectives. So now we are sort of getting into this customer level of service concept. So I spoke about the liquid services balance scorecard. So I sort of enlarged that graphic from the previous slide that had this 33 metrics, and 13 out of 33 really this first pillar is around the customers. And we do have this website, internal intranet site that has individual link to these 33 metrics that actually give us the graphics of each of these metrics. So for example, on the screen left hand side, we have the C-02 and C-08 as an example. So the first on the top is the sanitary sewer overflow events, and where we can capture the number of events, yes, SSO events historically, I think since 2013. And based on that, we sort of project how much SSO events that we're going to have in the next few years. And actually, this becomes a very powerful internal and external communication tools that, hey, we have certain projects to build, temporary SSO storage tanks, and that will drive this projection down. Like according to this projections around 2023, 24, 25, we are installing these tanks, and how it will impact the service levels relative to the SSO events, which is a big sort of challenges managing the social expectations and environmental expectations from the regions. Another example is around total energy use. That's the 8 KPIs under customers. And again, like that shows what's the historical energy usage in our operations, as well as what are we expecting for 2021, that kind of stuff. So this is a way to communicate both internally and externally around our service levels, around the customer level of service. The one level low, which I also briefly describe about the asset levels of service, is really centered around the asset assessment framework. So these 5 criteria of how the assets are performing around the physical condition, the maintenance cost, obsolescence, functionality, and compliance. And these are really the leading indicators of how these assets can provide the right service to that customer level service KPIs in the previous slides. So these are closely linked. And I mean, honestly, we didn't fully implement this or operationalize this into every assets that we own yet, because this framework has been developed only 2 years ago, and we have a lot of assets, and we're facing a lot of different challenges to implement it properly. But at least we built this building blocks to move into the next phase of the operationalization of these frameworks. And how, these levels of service are applied, really around the utilization of these levels of service. Both asset level service and customer level service are linked closely, and it's really driving that, how we make the investment decisions around our assets, how we do proper risk assessments, O&M prioritizations, the whole life cycle, and also the performance monitoring that I will, touch briefly in the next few slides, and also stakeholder engagement. So we recently included those graphics around the SSO, for example, to explain why we're requiring this much projects to get approved by the board, is to improve some of the key service areas that we are facing challenges currently. So, but really, like these 5 areas are really around that asset management activity. So that's why I put IE asset management at the bottom. And it's very hand to hand in terms of the level of service versus the asset management work. So levels of services in asset management, I think this is my last slide. Really, in our asset management plan, we've outlined and tracked performance against these metrics. So the first column, the CLOS objectives. So those are the 4 objectives that we included in our asset management policy that are linked to the high-level documents, strategic documents that are approved by the board. And out of that, we have this 13 KPI metrics that we're measuring in the balance scorecard. And then we do have the performance in terms of the overall performance. And this is one of the 4 storage area that we had, which is the North storage area, North Shore storage area collection. That's what this AMP was about. So we had the current historical performance in the last 5 years. And what are the related, the FAMP section. So FAMP stands for Facility Asset Management Plan in Metro. And in the report, also we have the asset levels of service performance tracking, really, around the condition, overall condition of the pump stations that are in this region, in this NSA region. And, again, so asset management plan have this levels of service metrics and performance tracking, so that how we're gonna link this to the risk assessment of these assets, as well as how these should drive our investment planning going forward. So yeah, so that's sort of my short summary of how Metro Vancouver has structured the levels of service and how that levels of service are being utilized in asset management plan. Any questions from the group?
Yeah. So Chris, I stuck a couple questions in chat. Really excellent job. Real good information and a good model. Others may have questions. We probably don't have too much time, you guys, because Mert has to do his and we have to, include the other. But, my question was about how you might be using risk in your asset service levels and matrix, as well as whether for these different KPIs or service levels or indicators, whether you are developing targets that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, very good question, Scott. So maybe I can get to the second question first. So in terms of target setting, we don't, for that SSO example, the real target should be a 0 overflow, but that's not realistic enough. And, it's going to take years to get to that, if we can get to that ever, right? So it's really that conversation at the high level between managers, directors and GM, and based on their knowledge and the contextual sort of settings of the region, because that really depending on the INI from the municipal the pipes, which we don't have full control of. So it's really that sort of the discussing what is the realistic targets for these metrics based on the historical performance, because we don't want to set up a target that's not achievable in the near term. And really that's to link to our capital plan and how these projects can improve some of these targets and performance going forward. So yeah, the answer is it's by the qualitative discussions by the stakeholders and senior managers in the group. For your second question, really it's really the crux of the why we're tracking the service levels, right? Because our asset risk should reflect what are the important services that we are missing or under delivering because of the condition issues or other performance issues. So they are really closely linked, especially in the asset management plan. We have a specific sections for asset risks that has not completely linked with the levels of service, but as long as sort of we have a good sort of connections between the two, that hey, we are seeing the high risk around these assets because it's a high risk, because we are under delivering on that service target SSO example again, right? So we're trying to make the connections and tell the story to the both internal stakeholder and as well as external stakeholders. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I see that Casey has his hand up.
Yeah, Casey?
Yeah, Chris, thanks for sharing this. I just had a question about the condition and level of service at the asset level that you had, the 5 scale that you had in the 5 categories, I believe it was, that you're looking at. And to what level of asset are you looking at when you're doing that rating? Is it the plant, is it the pump station, or is it like individual pipes or manholes kind of thing?
Excellent question. So in the first version of the AMP that we developed, since we didn't have that data at that asset level, we did it at sort of we have the hierarchy, asset hierarchy at Metro. We have facility, we have sub-facility. Well, we have asset class, facility, sub-facility, and asset, essentially, right? There's many different areas in between, but just to simplify the structure. And we really sort of target at the sub-facility level, not at the asset level. But the goal is to do it at the asset level once we sort of update and improve the asset registry, the quality of the asset registry. And really, because that's where the field staff can go out and collect the condition information at, right? So that's one of the challenges that we are facing here as well is really to come up with a robust asset registries that baseline so that we can start recording the condition information at that level and then roll up to this type of reporting going forward.
Great, thank you.
Excellent question. Anyone else? Okay. Thanks for the questions. And probably Mert.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. This was actually great. And you're right, we have a few parallels on a few things. On a side note, Chris, I don't know if you're able or willing, but at least some of your slides, especially the one where you had that 33 items separated around 4 balanced scorecard metrics like customer, innovation, and so forth. I think that could be very personally useful to me because internally we are having some discussions now. So if you don't mind sharing, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can share
okay.
those.
So okay, great, thank you. So I'll try to be very quick, just sort of tell a little bit brief description of how we are approaching levels of service. And again, we still need to select our topic area, everyone. So keep thinking, life cycle costing, monetized COF, service levels, keep that at the top of your heads. All right, so real quick. In 2016, actually about 5 years ago, Portland Water Bureau participated in WASA benchmarking exercise for the year 2016. WASA stands for Water Services Association of Australia. I wasn't here then, but I read the report that came out, and one of the 8 to 10 or so recommended improvement initiatives was improvements to the service level setting at the time, primarily setting the service levels with a more customer-facing focus, customer-focused really setup. One of the initiatives that sort of done like a sub-initiatives, if you will, that was done was then to actually do focus groups with our customer base. And after the initial scan of, what do other utilities do and what metrics they are using, what measures they are using, then to set up some focus group with our customers and really pick the ones that are worth meaningful to them, so that we could basically structure the rest of the process around it. So that went great for a while, but after maybe a couple of years, we noticed that we were not necessarily getting the improvement or the help we needed from all of the measures that we came up with. So last year we started to maybe just put a little bit more of a structured framework around it, still maintaining that customer focus. So I want to tell you a little bit about that today, really, today, this ongoing effort of a slight restructuring of our level of service framework. So I'm gonna share my screen after that background. All right, so I'm not gonna go into the presentation mode. I'm just gonna keep it like this, pretty quick. So after that effort was done, we came up with, and still using until it changes, 27 key service levels. In what Chris presented, these correspond to the 33, I think, metrics he had around customer, financial. Chris, I think you call it internal and innovation. So these are, if you read these first, I don't know how many here, maybe 14 or so, and then, the next, you'll notice that we have, workforce related metrics, we have financial metrics, and we have, I don't know, regulations related metrics, and more importantly, perhaps these more specific customer focused metrics. Now, these then were supported, these key service levels were then supported by a number of what we called programmatic service level metrics. And then those programmatic service level metrics were in turn supported by what we call workload measures. So here is an example. Less than 5% of our customers are out of water for more than 8 hours a year. That's a cumulative number we track. The objective there as well, for that to work, a certain programmatic service levels need to be met, meaning, a certain pipes a year need to be replaced. You could have something like an average pipe age, or you could have something like, we need to exercise a certain number of our valves, so that when we go out there and when they are needed for a shutdown, we know that they will work, and then we won't need to expand our shutdown area to accommodate a failed valve. And as a result, we can keep our percentage of our customers affected from the shutdown under a target, for example. Anyway, so that's the programmatic service level there, for example. So many valves will be exercised a year, followed by the fact that workload measure then says, okay, Dan, we need to have this many staff and this many structure and these things, whatever, available for us to be able to go ahead and do that. You could actually play with the wording a little bit there, so that, things align with what we are now calling an asset service level, meaning you could have 95% of the wells will function when you turn them. Then the corresponding workload measure for that then will be, okay, well, for us to be able to hit that, we estimate that we need to be exercising 500 wells a year, for example, something like that. Anyway, that was the structure there. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, not to prolong it, but a lot of the ones that you have, and probably ones that Chris has, actually came from AWWA's annual survey and system that they have. And I know that Chris's organization has participated in that as well. But these, a lot of utilities use some of these. They just don't necessarily, or they report on them. They don't necessarily use them actively in managing, but they're not, a lot of them look familiar.
Okay. Yeah. I think there is a lot of overlap for sure in the industry across multiple levels, multiple organizations. But more importantly, this is kind of like the way things are now, but we are, like I said, in a state of transition. And this is an example of what that looks like. And maybe I should I'm going to go to presentation mode because there is a small animation here. But what we're actually trying to do is, as Chris was describing, was really starting with the strategic objectives set forth in our strategic plan. And then from there, keeping our customer focus, identify which customer level of service metrics specifically from the perspective of the asset management team, us, support those strategic objectives. Under there, what do we then need our assets to do specifically to support a particular customer service level? And then what we need to do as an organization, what are the then organizational levels of service then to support that so that the assets will work, will do what they need to do. This is just one example of this pyramid structure, which basically comes from the IIM in our case. This very bottom, this is what we are actually proposing right now. In the current language that hasn't changed yet, generally speaking, what we call key service levels are actually at this customer level for the most part, at least from an asset management perspective. Now, we do have the other ones too, like finance and, we call it, I think, operational, it could be like training hours. It could be, on the finance side, like our bond rating and our debt ratio and stuff like that. Anyway, so we are actually trying to clean up the language a little bit too, but then sit programmatic service levels, as I was describing them, under the key service levels. And then there's the workload measures, organizational service levels. Anyway, so on the right, though, you see an example of how this all rolls up or down. So you set the objectives at the top, providing a reliable water supply. What is then the corresponding, again, keeping that customer focused? What is the corresponding one or more of however many? There's like a bunch of them. This is one example. What does it mean to have a reliable water supply from the customer's perspective? It means we've defined this with consultations with them. It means that not more than 5% of them will be out of water for 8 hours over the course of a year. Then it's up to us. Once the customer helps us set that, then we go back, we do our calculations, and we can then say something like, well, we have certain things need to work for us to meet that. And one of those things is that we need to keep our main break activity under X. In this case, X is 8 breaks per 100 miles per year. That is a function of the fact that, we have a certain crew size. They have to cover a certain square miles. They have to do other things in terms of responding to the breaks. So given all that, we need to have our infrastructure at a health level where we are going to be experiencing not more than 8 breaks per 100 miles per year. If we can do that, then we believe we are going to meet that customer service level. Now, for us to be able to present a system to our operations and maintenance folks so that they could actually get to where they need to go, we need to be keeping the system at a certain infrastructure health, if you will. For us to be able to do that, that is done through replacing a certain targeted number of our pipes every year. In this case, we're presenting it as we've done a lot of failure curve analysis, viable curves and failure data analysis to be able to get to this number, but that's our target. So if we replace 12 miles of our distribution mains per year, then we are going to be able to maintain this break activity under our target, for example. So the preference to use this pyramid structure actually that comes from IIM is that, again, line of sight, and I think Chris may have actually used the exact words to line of sight. So one thing to note is that this to us we call this the asset management side of this pyramid, also known as, in this case, customer side, similar to what Chris had as customer side. So we are actually going through some coordinations now with our strategic planning office, our finance folks, where they have a finance side of this pyramid as well, and there is a operational side as well, where we could actually track some of our other metrics, such as our diversity of our workforce, or number of training hours, or our, debt ratio, and our, capital project, achievement rate. Like if we said we're going to spend $100 million this year, are we able to spend it? That sort of stuff. So we want to sort of bring them together, everything going up to the strategic objectives at the very top set by the strategic plan. Anyway, in practice, real quick before we run out of time, just as an example of what this looks like for one of our asset types, hydrants, well, kind of one of the simpler ones I chose to illustrate a point, is like, how do these things then relate to each other? Because that pyramid was just only one example, each level basically having one, service level target. In this case, you'll notice something where, we have the customer service level there, which is actually in white background, meaning that a customer-facing service level that does not exist currently related to hydrants. So it's proposed, it's white here in this color. Under it sits two existing, in blue background, asset service levels in the swim lane there. These we already know, we already track. If those two things basically need to work together for us to achieve that customer service level. And then we have our workload measures, also known as our organizational level of service levels. These are the things that we need to do as an organization to be able to support our asset service levels. So I don't need to read them. You can see what they are for yourself there. One other note is that you'll see this little star. We are also using this opportunity to align our level of service statements or framework with how we deliver that service throughout our service area, because some services are distributed across geography, obviously, such as pressure or like fire flow coverage, and they may have some equity considerations too, where equitable distribution of our services to different parts of our service area with different socio-demographics that actually help us define equity here versus equity there can actually help play a role in us improving our service delivery. So we're also using this as an opportunity for that. Anyway, so this is our, again, work in progress. We are actively working on this. We have 22 asset management plans, hydrants being one of them, and we are revamping each and every one of them in this new framework. And then, of course, we'll have to go through our internal approval cycles. Anyway, with that, I don't see if there are any questions, so I'm going to stop presenting, and we can have a brief discussion if you have any questions, anyone around these. After that, we need to move on and maybe, I don't know if you want to take a vote or discuss or pick a few topic areas of interest to go forward. Thank you. There's a question here. Scott, maybe that was a question you asked to Chris and not
that was
me.
to Chris. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see the time on it. So okay.
Yeah. You might summarize again in just slightly more detail. It looks like you have a little more time if they're going to be voting, on these areas. Just what the other ones are. I think they get the idea on service levels.
Yeah. So the other ones are just to recapture. Moving from our story, basically our case study would be moving from like a score-based consequence of failure assessment table to a monetized version of that, to be able to use it later on better for comparisons or prioritization or links to business cases and so forth. So that's our option one, let's call it. Our option two that we discussed last week was, given an asset type category, where it is located and whatnot, trying to find ways to do a better estimate on its long-term life cycle cost, meaning going above and beyond that initial installation and replacement value, really, that we track in our asset registers, taking one step further and then distributing that cost over assets life cycle for operations and maintenance activities, maybe predictive maintenance, preventive, corrective, which may actually change over time, like preventive maintenance maybe is the same every year or every other year or whatever, but like corrective maintenance may be increasing as the asset gets more use or more rotating hours. Maybe, maybe not. Like that's the sort of discussion that we would need to have there. Let's call that option two, life cycle costing, and option three would be working together to develop and really pilot and test its impact on a level of service framework. Chris already, presented one. We have one sort of in progress. I'm sure maybe others have other ones that we can all discuss. So that, trying to basically create a case study around what that looks like, where we start now, what that looks like at the end, and then we pilot and see if we can make any decisions off of that. Would be like probably the scope of the case study there. Anyway, I'll
just add that also there's a business process element to it as well. So if you're developing service, it would be the documentation of maybe where you are and where you're going to go, and documenting what that business process is like for creating, updating, monitoring, those service levels.
Yeah, the asset management plan development has processes that process flow diagram that has processes for setting service levels. So this would be an expansion of that.
Mm-hmm.
That one. So
Casey has a hand up.
Casey, yeah.
Yeah. First of all, thanks. That was a great presentation. I like that. It really dovetails in with what Chris is doing too, and I kind of like that it goes a little more in depth down to kind of the how-to more than just the high level. But I'll just jump in. My thoughts on the three options are, I think for us, and this is probably more personal opinion than anything, is that the monetized consequence of failure, that's good, and I've looked at it in the past. It seems like you really need a level of maturity to really get good benefit out of that without it just being kind of a wag. I don't know that we're at that, level of maturity to benefit as much from it. It's very interesting, but I just don't know what the payoff for us would be in the short run. Which leaves us down to the other two that I like both of them. I mean, life cycle cost is, everybody's trying to figure that out right now. And I think it'd be good to work together as a group to try to come up with that and come up with some, general lifespans, expected lives and failure curves and that sort of thing. Because they're hard to do, on your own a bit.
This is Cello. I'm having trouble. This is very interesting what you're saying, but I cannot see who is talking right now when I look on the.
Oh, it's Casey. Sorry.
Casey.
So I don't know. Maybe you have it's fine.
Casey was talking. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
It's probably Microsoft.
No, yeah. Go ahead, please. I was just confused. So it was frozen for a moment. So please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So the life cycle cost would benefit us. And I know that level of service is something that our organization is starting to inquire about. And we're really looking at, with our asset management program, doing that, the strategic objectives of the organization down to how to apply it down to the asset level, that same pyramid that you're looking at. So that would probably be my first vote, would be levels of service, followed by life cycle cost as a close second.
Okay.
And willing to talk about those more, but I'll let others kind of jump in.
Okay. Also, everyone keep in mind, we are primarily right now talking about asset management, workflow development. We also have our enterprise risk management side as well. And there is a enterprise risk, and under it, there's operational risk, and under it, there's asset risk. So, that we also have like these tactical risks. So we have almost like a connection, if you will, an overlap as well on that risk side too. Just keep it in mind as we talk. Thank you, Casey, for your feedback and input. Anybody else who wants to chime in and let us know their take?
Alriza, I think you're driving in your car, but maybe. But did you have any comments?
No, not really. I'm driving, as you said. No comments for me.
Would there be, is there something that you think within DC Water you could take on, and what would be most useful for you guys over there?
You know what? Functionally, I'm not really in charge of asset management. So if you don't mind, I'm going to run it through the appropriate team, and I'll get back to you. But I guess level of service, ever increasing level of service, or I guess it's something that has been always our main objective. How we are, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, to pick one of the three topics that Mert mentioned, it's something that I guess, if you don't mind, I will pass on the recording of this meeting to our asset management team. We don't have a formalized asset management team, to be honest with you, hence I'm here. But I'll make sure the people who probably have to listen, they listen, and I'll get back to you in the next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, let us know, please. You know, if you receive any feedback. Thank you.
Sure, I will.
Lisa, you know, I
Yes,
think
sir.
maybe Craig has just left. John
Yes.
Cosa has, you know, might be, he's been participated at the early stages of this program, and he might, and
Right.
he's doing asset management. He might be, you know, a good sounding board so that whatever was done here is consistent. Anyway, and then.
Yeah, I'll run it through John, but John, I guess, has been focusing on lead service line replacement program recently. But
Yeah, okay.
anyway, I'll run it through the team that I assume they are going to be our asset management team in the future. We are in the process of forming an asset management department at DC Water, but the whole thing is up in the air. So anyway, so I'll make sure the right people, I guess our consultant, I'll get back to you.
Not to overdo this, but you know, we would be in what we do is case studies, and there could be a case study overall, but there could be individual ones. And for example, lead service lines and all that, it could be a category of assets, and that could be a focus area, for example, of creating service levels and risks and everything else. Just food for thought.
Sure.
And then Deb, did you have any reaction?
I love the levels of service, but I think that we can be okay. But life cycle cost would be probably a really good one.
Okay. All right. So level of service, maybe. Okay. So far, not a lot of excitement on monetized consequence of failure, but life cycle costing seems like a good one, and level of service seems to be interesting. Let's see. So that was there. Others spoke. Okay. So Chris, I guess it's you and I left here as utility partners to chime in. Do you have a favorite, Chris, or any?
I mean, I like all three for sure. Initially, I thought the monetization of risk could be very interesting, because that's one of the areas that Metro hasn't really got into, even though we talked about it. So it'll be very interesting to hear from other utilities. But I kind of see, you know, Casey's point about, unless we are very mature in terms of, you know, how to estimate, you know, the consequence, and which can be very different from one area to the other. That could be a challenge. So I mean, with that in mind, I mean, probably my vote would be then the life cycle costing, which is very closely tied to a lot of asset management initiative, like how to make the investment decisions, how to prioritize our capital plan, you know, whatnot, and it's one of the key components in asset management plan as well. So yeah, I'll go with the asset management. I mean, the life cycle costing as my first vote.
Okay.
And if I may, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I apologize, but if I may, if we get the life cycle costing, I think the monetization piece, you know, for risk that will help us.
Good point.
Yeah, it will. It can be an input into it, because an asset's failure can you know, calculation could benefit from knowing that too. Now, personally, between the two, between the three, sorry, I'm also leaning towards coming up with some of the rules of thumb and building upon asset lifecycle costing estimates. So that would be my first vote. With that initial earlier reminder I told you about, maybe starting from next meeting, we'll focus on our risk framework too a little bit. So there may be an opportunity to blend that into our enterprise risk management and beyond potentially. I don't know yet. I gotta really sit down and start thinking about that. We don't know, I guess the point, but maybe Chris and I can brainstorm, tap into Scott and Cello's experience, and then if we can come up with something worth bringing to the bigger group here, we can do so next time we meet. But to me, that sounds like there's interest around, most votes are around life cycle costing. So for the, in 1 minute, that actually would involve developing some rules of thumbs and then checking them with actual data we can gather from our respective utilities. I already have a library of some standard deterioration curves for asset profile for different asset types. So I'm happy to present that. I'm guessing others may have something in the back of their minds or some materials that they could also introduce. So we can talk about those and then see how that affects the change in life cycle cost over time. It's one thing to calculate total life cycle cost. It's another thing to know how that changes for an asset that lives for 100 years, because that could vary a lot early on versus later on in an asset's life. So that would be good to know that. So those are the some steps, and sounds like we have some consensus on that, which means that maybe for the next meeting, we can put forward some tasks associated with achieving that. And then we could brainstorm those tasks, and then we could then come up with a schedule that goes with those tasks, if that is acceptable. Any comments?
Sounds like a good idea to me. I'm happy with that.
Okay, thank you. That's good. And I think that was a thumbs up there from Cello, so thank you, Cello. And just to get a head start to things, if schedules allow, maybe Chris and I and Scott, Cello, we can do a quick, maybe 30 minutes even discussion, just to if it like greases the wheels a little bit for our discussion in 2 weeks' time.
Yes.
In the meantime, please start thinking about a couple of things. Start thinking about, given the asset lifecycle cost components that we are all familiar with, I'm sure, see what kind of information is stored where in your utilities. Because I want to be able to, if we create a model, like, we want to be able to test it, and we want to be able to run some sensitivity analysis on that. So see if you can, in the meantime, think about where you could locate some of that information.
Yeah, and just to add, and we're about done, but I'm thinking of DC Water here, is that they do have a macro model. I don't know if they have, looking at lead service lines or other categories of assets, whether they have the data to support it, because there are standard methodologies to do life cycle costing, right? But having the data in order to populate that. And then there's also the non-monetized, aspects that could be part of it. But if that sounds good to everybody, like Mert says, then a couple weeks from now, and maybe there will be some other participants. Great Lakes Water is one. They just haven't. Jody's doing another job now, Caldwell, but they've got a lot of good stuff. There are some others that could really benefit. I mean, where the group would benefit from the work they've done. So I don't know if we can recruit more members, but that would be a good thing if we could.
Okay.
All right. Sorry.
Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so unless there's anything else, we'll adjourn until next time.